Hi, my name is Ceci and welcome to my cooking show. Just kidding, I don't really cook like that, but I am cooking dinner and I needed to make a video, I wanted to make a video on when I found out I was pregnant and what happened through my pregnancy, but I'm also cooking, so kind of join me on this one. So I found out I was pregnant when I was 4 weeks pregnant, and I had been living with my husband for a month. So I guess I got pregnant really quickly, you can say. At the time, my husband was just my boyfriend. He hadn't got married yet. And so yeah, jumping right into it, I found out I was 4 weeks pregnant within, I want to say I found out January 28th. I think it was 4 days after my birthday. So that was a surprise, nice surprise, and we were okay with it because we were like, okay, if it happens, like, it is what it is, and you know, it's a blessing, right? So right away I knew I wanted to keep the baby, and I didn't tell my husband right then and there because he had left that day for work. He was traveling. He still does that. He's an electrician, but he travels for work. So he had left to go out of state that day, and I didn't want to tell him that night because it was pretty late. I just didn't think it was appropriate to tell my husband, hey, I'm pregnant, as he's driving to work. Anyway, I didn't tell him. I waited till the next morning. I woke up really early. I worked night shift, so it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday night when I found out, and I had to go to work Monday, but I woke up early on Monday because I needed to go to the bathroom. So I went, and I noticed I was bleeding, which scared me because I knew, like, if you're pregnant, you're not really supposed to be bleeding. Like, that's not a good sign. But then again, it was really early on, so I don't know. I ended up going to the hospital, and my mom meets me there because she had called me on the way. I guess, you know, mother's intuition told her something was up. So she came to the hospital in 10 minutes. She really got there right as I was parking, and I don't know how she got there so quick, but she got there really fast because, you know, moms. Anyway, my mom gets there, and I'm like, okay, what now? We wait for a very long time. So I don't think that's like common practice, but we waited for a very long time in the emergency room. I ended up going in, and they did a whole lot of ultrasounds and like blood work. And they were like, yeah, it looks like you're pregnant, but you might have a miscarriage, like, seeing as you are bleeding. And strike one on when the doctors were wrong, right? I go on about my daily life after that. They told me to take it easy. I did end up going to my friend's house because I was staying with her at the time. That's where I was living at the time. And my mom really wanted me to go home with her, and I said no. Which I probably should have, because I don't know, I feel bad for saying no now. I end up going to my friend's house, like I stated, and then we kind of chilled out that day. I didn't do much. The next day at work, like, I took it slow. I was working night shift as a quality auditor, so it did kind of involve me moving around all day. on my feet, and it was just, if it was gonna happen, it was gonna happen. It was inevitable. But I continued on my pregnancy, thank God. Early in my pregnancy, I did suffer like a mini panic attack, but that was mostly because I had a stressor, and I don't really want to get into detail about that because it's just not worth it. But anyway, I ended up moving to an apartment on my own, and I say on my own because my husband was traveling like for his job, and so he couldn't really stay with me except for weekends when he'd come home. So I was pretty upset about that. I did most of the move by myself. My mom definitely helped me. Like, she would always help me by cleaning and stuff like that, because I guess she noticed, like, early on in my pregnancy, I was pretty fragile. And I hate that. I hate depending on people. I'm not the type of person who likes to depend on others. That stresses me out even more, but I had no choice but to depend on my mom at that point. I kept getting, well, the doctors kept telling me were Braxton Hicks, and I guess some of them were Braxton Hicks contractions, but I don't know why they started so early on. They started really, really early in my second trimester, and I didn't want to seem like I was going to the hospital all the time, but I was, because I was like, hey, what's going on? Like, I don't know anybody who gets these as often as I do. The doctors kept telling me, oh, it's just Braxton Hicks, lay down, don't worry about it. The only person that really took my things into consideration, and God bless her, was my certified nurse midwife. And I know that sounds weird, but the practice that I go to has both doctors and nurse midwives. And I did want a doctor to deliver my baby, but every once in a while I'd get this nurse midwife, and she was so nice about everything, and she understood me, and she listened. And that made the biggest difference in the world. She ended up prescribing me Zoloft because I kept having panic attacks where I'd also get go to the hospital for, because my heart was just racing. And they ended up telling me, like, hey, you can take the smallest dose of Zoloft, which I did throughout my whole pregnancy, and then even afterwards. So continuing on, I didn't really think much about that stuff, I guess. Maybe I should have stayed with my mom at the time, I don't know. But throughout my whole pregnancy, I had a whole lot of anxiety and depression, and now it's being normalized. At the time, like, I know it's only been 2 years, but not everybody, or not a lot of people, were talking about how they had depression within their pregnancy. And everybody tells you, like, it's a happy time, be excited, be happy. But nobody, especially men, don't get, like, okay, but your body is going through so many changes, so many hormones, mood swings, just all of it. And my husband tried his best to understand me, but again, doctors, for example, every time I'd go to the hospital, there was a male doctor, and he was not understanding at all. And the first 2 times that I went, because I was getting contractions, or what he said, Braxton Hicks, again, 2 more strikes where they were wrong. He kept telling me, like, it's fine, just go home, you're gonna be okay, take it easy, or whatnot. And it wasn't that I wasn't getting contractions, because I feel like those might have been Braxton Hicks, but it was building up. I had to be laid off of work because of my anxiety and depression, and my contractions, because they kept coming every time I was walking and I'd get contractions. I stopped working when I was 5 months along, And being home, and like my husband really tried his best, and like I'd go shopping for baby stuff just like to try to cheer me up and do crafts, and my mom would come and help me, and she'd make sure that I wasn't really on my feet a lot. She'd like make sure like, hey, you're getting your adequate exercise, but let me just help you by cooking, or let me do all the heavy lifting and cleaning for you. And like, I'm so thankful to her for doing so. I ended up having to go to the hospital, I think when I was 30 weeks pregnant, 30 and a half weeks pregnant. And they didn't tell me anything. They did a test to see if I was going to go into labor within the next 2 weeks. It's like the swab that tests for amniotic fluid and things like that, or something like that. And it like lets them know, is this person going to go into labor within the next 2 weeks? Well, it came out negative is what I'm remembering, but regardless, they gave me a shot to prevent me from going into labor. I guess it's progesterone, I don't know. They gave that to me, and they were like, okay, well, this should hold you off for the next 2 weeks, and like in 2 weeks when you have your next check, make sure you tell them, we'll write it in the notes to give you another one of these tests. I said, okay. Thankfully, I had also called my midwife and told her about the situation, and she ordered for me for the next time that I come in to have an ultrasound, just to make sure that the baby was okay and moving down with her head down. And she was, thankfully my baby was head down at the time. She was ready to come out, because the day I had my appointment was the day I started getting real contractions, and I kept playing them off as Braxton Hicks because, you know, I kept getting told that's what it was. I stopped on my way up to the doctor's office, and I contracted, and that should have been my first sign. Like, I had to stop and breathe, and I think that was around 8 or 9 a.m. that I had to stop and breathe through my contraction. And I was on the phone with my husband, and he was like, oh, are you okay? But again, we were kind of used to me getting contractions and just playing it off, and he kept telling me like, haha, another doctor's bill. But again, thankfully I ended up going to the doctors that day and checking on my baby. I asked the doctor, and I feel like this was kind of negligent, I asked the doctor if she could do the test again, and this is what wasn't my midwife, this is another doctor, and I asked her if she could please give me one of those tests, because that's what they told me at the emergency room whenever I went last time. And she goes, no, it's not needed, I think you're fine, we'll do it next time. So I was set to go back in another 2 weeks. Well, lo and behold, I didn't get to go back in another 2 weeks. I ended up going to the hospital that same night. My cousin and I were joking around that I was going to go into labor that day, but it was just a joke. I don't know. But she kept seeing me contracting, and she just thought, okay, it's fun and games, and so did I. Like, I was like, okay, it's all fun and games until I actually do go into labor. So we were just like, oh, what is today's day? And we're like, no, it can't be, because I was just 33 weeks pregnant. There was no reason for me to go into labor early. Like, you know, like other than the stress of, you know, pregnancy and then the depression and anxiety, everything else was fine. Like, I was fine with my blood pressure. My blood pressure was great, and then so was my blood sugar. So those are like the two main concerns, I guess, but everything else seemed fine, like other than the Braxton Hicks as well. Eventually, we went to bed, my cousin left, and my husband had just started another job like 2 days prior, and I was at home, and yeah, he went to bed, and I went to go shower, and I thought I heard something, like a water pop, but I was like, what the heck is that? I thought it was in my ear, but nothing like serious. And it wasn't like it was a very, very loud noise. It was like something that I heard like in my body, but I just thought it was my ears. I thought I had water in my ears or something like that. I ended up going to the bathroom, and I went to bed, and I was like, I forgot to mention I lost my mucus plug that day too, but it was early in the morning, so like before I went to the doctors. Anyway, I was like, okay, something feels off, and I had forgot to put a towel down. I always started putting towels down because I was so scared that my water would break on the bed. So I ended up, thankfully I did, I ended up putting a towel over the bed, and my husband's like, what's going on? I'm like, nothing. I went to bed. I coughed, man, and I felt the same noise and the same, like, just I heard the same noise and I felt something, and I was like, oh no. So I rushed to the bathroom, and sure enough, like, it was a gush. And you know, they tell you that there's normally not a gush like in movies. It was a gush. This was huge, and I was freaking out because I was like, I'm not peeing, and I saw like a little bit of blood in there, and I was like, I'm not peeing. This isn't me. And I woke up my husband. I was like, hey. He's like, are you okay? I was like, no, I think my water just broke. This man did not believe me for the first, I don't know, 5 minutes. He really stood there and kept asking me, are you sure? Like, yeah, I'm sure. Bless him. He didn't know any better. And then once once we realized, okay, I'm going into labor, like, he rushed, he got me my things, and we rushed to the hospital. And I kid you not, the entire ride, I didn't know there was so much amniotic fluid. Like, the entire ride, I drenched myself, I drenched my clothes, the towel, the robe I had on, like, it was, the pad, everything. Like, I feel so bad for that car seat. Like, I feel so bad. And I feel so bad for my husband who had to clean it. But thankfully it wasn't the bed, right? I ended up going to the hospital, and I got there like at 10:15, literally really fast. My husband drove us really fast, and we only live like, actually we live 15 minutes away from the hospital, but you know, within that whole getting ready and stuff, like, he rushed me to the hospital. And then that's a whole different story because it's now getting a little long and I have to finish cooking. But I'll make a story time on my labor and delivery. Thank you for watching.